Welcome to the Whistler Design Preview. My name is John Gehlsen, and I'll be your host for the next 2 days, going over the preview information for the Whistler product. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a program manager in the Windows group, and I ran the Windows 2000 JDP program, and several of you asked throughout the program is you wanted information on the future of the product. As the program managers have put together the specs for the next version of the product, we wanted to spend some time with you and go over information on the product and, more importantly, get feedback from you on the product to validate the feature set that the program managers are planning for Whistler. So I wanted to spend a few minutes going over the product that we're using today, NetPodium, that we'll be using for the presentation, and then also give you some information on how we'd like you to provide feedback throughout the presentations. So first, let me thank you for participating in this event. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to listen to the program managers talk about the product and give them feedback. This event is only for participants of the RDP and JDP programs. We wanted to make sure that the participants of this program had the first chance to talk to the program managers about the Whistler product. And all content of these presentations is under NDA. So the product that we're using today is called NetPodium. And you can go to www.netpodium.com for more information. This is the first time we're trying this product in such a venue, so we'd really appreciate your input at the conclusion and let us know what you thought about this way of having a virtual meeting. So I copied some information from the NetPodium website that gives you some information on what the product does. So while this presentation is going on, you'll be able to see the slides from the presenters. You'll be able to see and hear them during the presentation, and you'll also have the ability to interact with them by asking questions through the web interface. So as we proceed in the presentation, you'll be able to ask questions, and the presenter will be able to respond to those interactively. NetPodium also provides the ability to provide online surveys. And the reason for this is we like to get your feedback. Now, some of the surveys are multiple choice, and some of the surveys ask you to type in text. So we're going to try out a survey right now, so I'm going to ask the other people here in the room to pop up the survey on your screen so that you'll have a chance to see what a survey looks like and be able to respond. Now, as I said, some of the surveys are multiple choice, and some of them have text that you can type in. For the ones that have the multiple choice, the presenter will probably come back during the presentation and show you the results. For the ones that have you type in text, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for them to show you the results because it would just be pages and pages of text. At the conclusion of the event, we're going to take all the surveys and all the questions that you asked and create documents that we'll put up on our web server for you to download at a later date and review. So you will be able to see the results of the surveys at a future time. So let's go ahead and try that, and if we could, go ahead and put in your answer, and let's go ahead and bring up the results of that survey. So hopefully by now you're seeing the results of the survey up on your screen. And so now you see how the product works and how you can type in and put in answers to the surveys. So let's go over the agenda. We've got a full 2 days of presentations planned. And what we did was we went to the program managers and gave them this opportunity to present to you. So we have about 20 sessions over the next 2 days. And the purpose of this, like I said, is to let them give you information on what they're planning for the feature set for the product. And more importantly, we really want to hear your feedback. So feel free to fill out the surveys. Feel free to email the program managers after the conclusion. Provide them with more information on what you think of their feature, other features you'd like to see, and interact with them and give them that feedback so we can make this the best product possible. So on Thursday, we have Iain McDonald here in the studio with us. He's going to give you a Whistler overview, talk about the feature set from a very high level, talk about the schedule and the current status of the product. We're also going to have Michael Dennis come in and talk about RSOP. Nathan's going to come in and talk about user data migration. BJ Whalen coming in to talk about common desktop management scenarios. Whistler security, Parit's going to come in and discuss that. Dilip's going to come in and talk about WMI. We do have a change in presenters for Simon. Simon is out, and so he'll be having someone on his team come in and present for that. So that is a change in the agenda. He'll be coming in to talk about enterprise event log. And then Deborah's going to come in and talk about UI shell updates. Great presentation. I'd really encourage you to participate in that one. On MMC, Vivek's going to come in and talk about changes in MMC. On Friday, we also have a full day. We're going to have Mark Carroll come in and talk about application compatibility in Whistler. Stuart Kwan's going to come in and talk about updates to the Active Directory. We also have Brian Valentine coming in for a very short 10-15 minutes to thank you for participating and answer any questions you might have about the product. Pascal's going to come in and talk about headless support in Whistler. And then we have William Dixon coming in. And William is just going to cover IPsec, so that title might be a little misleading. It's not remote access, the end-to-end scenario. William is going to come in and talk about IPsec. IS 5.1, Stu Wiley. Internet Explorer, Dave Massey. New directions for Windows Help. Evan cannot make it, so Michael is going to take his place. Volume snapshots with David Golds. Cluster service with Mark Wood. And network load balancing with Nikhil. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Iain McDonald, and he's going to talk about the Whistler schedule. If you have any questions during this presentation, feel free to just type it in. I'll be over with the people running the show, and I'll be able to see the questions, and I'll respond to them as I receive them. And so feel free to ask questions, participate in the event, give us your feedback. It's what we're here for. So with that, I'll turn it over to Iain.
Thanks, John. My name's Iain McDonald. I'm the project manager for the Whistler project, and I was the project manager for Windows 2000. Just to give you the history, just in case anybody wants to know, at the end of Windows 2000 we had the Neptune project going along, which was moving the NT base into the consumer market, and we also had the Odyssey release going along that that was focused more at the business end of the spectrum, or more down the line of what we did with Windows 2000. We decided to put those together and make them one larger release around the time we released Windows 2000. And we had to get a new project name, and I was actually tasked with getting a new project name, and I went away to Whistler, and I was going down a hill, and I was thinking, I've got to name this, I've got to get a name for this project, I've got to get a name for this project, and I fell over and hurt myself really bad, so I decided that I was going to settle it at that moment and call it Whistler, and so that's where the name came from, if you're wondering. The good thing is that we have good friends up there at the who run the mountain and things like that, so they were very happy to agree for us to use the name. A bit of free advertising. So my intention of what I'm going to talk about over the next 40 minutes or so is talk about the things that we're doing on a high level and things that affect us in a big way for the Whistler project. It is a very big project. You know, I don't think we can do the Windows platform or take the Windows platform forward these days without having a very large project. There are some things that traditionally we're doing now that traditionally we haven't cared about so much in the NT side of the world. For example, you may have seen some of the application compatibility updates come out recently that have had things like support for a whole lot more games. I can tell you there are many times last year where bugs came in or issues came up around a game, and my only response was, well, that doesn't really make any sense for the business market. Whereas now I come to work, and you know, if I have to go and play Age of Empires, it's really me doing work each day. So the big and hard things that we're doing for Whistler, I think the hardest thing is this consumer NT, or consumerizing NT, and we've got some of the people coming in and talking about some of the things that are quite difficult within there. I think the biggest thing that comes up is the retail upgrade and the user state migration. So the retail upgrade story is, you know, if someone's got Windows 95 or Windows 98, getting them and getting all their settings across in a meaningful way and making sense within an NT base. Now that I feel starts being a really is one of the really hard things we've got to do, because we've got to deal with much broader application compatibility issues, and we do have some things coming along about application compatibility in the next 2 days. Nathan will come in, actually, I think in the next session, and talk in more detail about the sort of things that we've got to do for state migration. But that's one of the really hard jobs, and one of the things that I feel we've just got to nail for the consumer experience. One of the other things is, and we've probably all experienced this, we released Windows 2000 and we haven't got the level of driver coverage that we feel we would need for a consumer release or a retail release. In many cases, the sort of devices that are used in the business world is a much smaller group than the sort of devices that you want to have at home. So, the sort of things that I think are very, very, or super important for us to think about, or to work with the vendors to be able to supply drivers, are things like, the 3D acceleration for all the really super fast video cards that are out there. Things like all these new cameras that are coming out and getting support for all of those. And these devices and support for those devices is coming online for Windows 2000 at the moment, but we want to get that and make that a great experience for people as they get it out of the get the product out of the box. Some of the other stuff that I think is really important for that consumer world is making the system boot quicker. At the moment, between NT4 and Windows 2000, we removed a lot of stuff from the booting process of the system. But I think that we've got to remove more, and we've got to make that faster and work on making the boot scenarios come up in no time, and also make it less mystical as it comes up. The experience for the first time of a user of the screen going black and then doing something else and then doing something else is not something that we particularly want to be able to or have happen in the consumer world. And as we go and look at that being important there. Other sorts of stuff that come up, or other sorts of stuff that become important in this consumer world, is simplifying the logon. And one of the things that I think is very important is also where you have a simplified system for people to be able to get into the system. I also think it's very important that we've got to be able to simplify the way that you can use that system to come into a corporate system. So if I've got a home computer that's not in a domain, I've got to be able to easily get in to log on to my corporate network or dial into my corporate network through whatever method. And so I don't have an experience of every time I go and hit a different resource, I get an auth pop-up coming up to me. So we're looking at how we simplify that. One of the things that will be happening in the client version of the product is that we will actually be including terminal server, or what we'll be calling personal terminal server, as a method to be able to switch between sessions on the client. So the terminal server base is moving all the way across the product line, so that not only do you get the things that you use today or you're using with Windows 2000 with having terminal server in there, remote administration, etc., etc. Now you get it as a method of being able to run 2 user sessions at the one time and easily switch between them. I also think that in the corporate environment, that's going to make your administration or help desk type administration of desktops a lot easier as well. But really, we're doing it mainly because we want to have a great experience for people to be able to have multiple users on a home machine and be able to switch between them. You'll actually see, I'll step back. The simplified logon actually does really look quite different from what it is today. And one of the things that I'll say there is that with this outside the domain access, or a machine that's not in a domain getting the simplified UI, everybody is an administrator at that point. So everybody who is given an ID on that system is an administrator. Obviously, you can go through and use the standard NT or Windows 2000 tools to be able to remove someone as an administrator rights, but by default, everybody is an administrator. The only tip I would give to anybody once they get the beta and they want to have a look at some of the different things that occur when you get out of a domain, is remember your admin password, because the first time I did it, I got out of the domain, I got all the fancy new UI, and I didn't know the administrator password and had to do a clean install on that system. So I was a doofus, and you know, those things happen to everybody. And I'm sure I'm not going to be the last person that does that. One of the other things is that because we are moving into a more consumer world, we are going to be changing some of the UI features within the Windows 2000 product. So Whistler is going to look a bit different from Windows 2000. There will be a registry switch and an administrative switch that you can hit on the system so that it looks like Windows 2000. And the intention there, and I think we had a big push on this, is that we didn't particularly want to have in the corporate world where you'd done a whole lot of work around documenting how it works with the UI as it is, and then 12 months later have an update come out that means that you've got to re-go and touch all that or go and touch all that stuff. So we will be having a switch so that you can go and turn on the Windows 2000 UI within your organizations and set that as a policy across your organization if you want to do that. Deb Weissman's actually coming in tomorrow, and she's going to be coming and talk tomorrow or today? Today. And talking about the UI differences and the things that are coming up there. One of the things that I will say is that at the moment, my aim for hardware specs on the system is to keep it the same as Windows 2000. So on the workstation product, minimum being 64 meg P133, which is a pretty slow machine today, and I think that most of you are probably finding that that is, you know, an okay experience. We actually had a number of people who had to, you know, very senior people within the org who had to actually self-host P133s with 64 meg and especially as their home machines and things like that. It's not that bad an experience, but it's probably not the sort of experience that you would give to everybody every day. I don't particularly at the moment see why we would raise that. I think that some of our OEMs would love for us to be able to raise that and sell more hardware, but there's no real reason for that. But I think that the sweet spot really comes in when you start looking at a Pentium 3 with about 128 meg of RAM for most situations. But at the moment, we're leaving that as the minimum for the workstation product, and for the server products, obviously need more RAM for baseline server. But I don't see why we got to raise the processor speed or the minimum processor speed. The other thing I'll say there is that you'll get a lot, you know, and I'm sure that all of you know this, you get a lot more bang for the buck if you stick a bunch more RAM in a machine than you speed up the processor and leave a lower amount of RAM in there. So that's me sort of randomly going over the first point of the overall things that we've got to do with the Whistler release. The second thing is fixed deployment blockers. I think that one of the things that historically we've seen is that when people start rolling out products and deploying things, there are multiple levels of issues that come up. One of them really is that more and more people are learning a standard way of being able to deploy things like the directory, and basically a common wisdom comes out that says, you know, here's the best way. And at the moment I see that there's a number of different ways that people are deploying things, but we're really learning, you know, I think that both us and our customers are learning the best ways and the best practices to be able to do that. And I think that a lot of you guys went through that a lot earlier. And to me, and just from my history, that's very similar to the sort of experience that we had between Exchange 4.0 and Exchange 5.0. And I look at Whistler as being, for the people who have been involved in our JDP or early adopter programs for a while, I look at Whistler as being more akin to the sort of stuff that we did in Exchange 5.0 and the level of release there. And there will be a couple of levels of deployment blockers. So the first level of deployment blocker, I see as a straight bug in the system that we'll be fixing in a service pack. No question. You know, we're committed to trying to turn that around as fast as possible, and obviously many of you have got you know, got service agreements with us. Actually, all of you will. So you know, we're obviously committed to getting those fixes out as quickly as possible. And if we're not, I'd love to hear that. The second level is the things that get a bit harder and involve, you know, fixes in the code or multiple fixes in the code, as well as changes to the way people are deploying things, and basically working around issues. And the third level is something that we haven't seen that much of so far, but you know, I expect that we will see this, is architectural issues. And some of the architectural issues we can't I don't want to fix in a service pack. You know, we've said our commitment is to not add features in service packs, and that's not something that we want to do or feel it should be done. And in fact, you know, we've got significant feedback from history about the problems around that. So what we will be doing is addressing some of the issues. You know, for example, here's the one that I would say is probably the biggest, and I'm sure that there's going to be a little bit of a talk around this, is the fact that you've got this global catalog requirement out into the branch office scenario. So if you've got somewhere where you've got, you know, a really small site out there that, you know, basically seeing this underlying replication traffic out to global catalog, and we require it way out there. You know, that's one of the things that we want to be able to remove, and we're working to be able to do that, remove that requirement for the Whistler release. But I will say it's very incremental. The sort of stuff that we want to do with this release is incredibly incremental, especially for the corporate market. And you know, we do really want to make it easier for people to deploy the product. We want to be able to simplify. We want to be able to, you know, on the administration side, we want to be able to do a lot more scriptable admin, things like that. But, you know, I would categorize it as a very incremental release. And, you know, at the moment, I haven't heard of, I've heard of a couple of people being blocked on, you know, bugs that we're fixing in the service pack, etc., etc. But I haven't really heard of anybody blocked because of architectural issues, except, you know, the only people, sorry, I'll take that back. The only people that I know who are blocked rolling out to some far offices is because of this global catalog issue. But they're very large deployments that you know, are able to order things out to be able to wait for that, or when they go out to those deployments, they'll be able to wait for that. That actually brings me back to one little aside that I will go into. The service pack 1, we look to be releasing in June or the end of Q2, and the data center release is on track to be released around the same time. We're very, very much wanting to tie those two releases together, or be able to get those two releases out at the same time. At the moment, the beta looks to be released about the end of next week. So for data center and for the service pack, you guys should be seeing an update come out at the end of next week. But you know, that is the beta rather than the final thing. And we do really believe in the idea these days of betaing service packs. I think that's the right thing to do, because I don't think any of us want to go back to NT4 service pack 2. Okay, other stuff. 64-bit. Other stuff we're doing for Whistler. 64-bit is, you know, we really believe that the Itanium chip will start introducing some really cool things for Windows as a platform. You know, just the fact that you can get more stuff out of you know, more stuff through the chip at any one time is a very, very, you know, the scenarios that end up being really aided by that, you know, whether it's SQL Server or large SQL Server databases, or whether it's IIS, or, you know, and over the long term, I think that there's going to be things like, you know, a lot more of the streaming media stuff will actually come back to being, relying on being able to handle larger data streams. At the moment, we're working very closely with Intel on the release there. At the moment, I would say that we're sometime in Q3 this year for a release on that. It is based off the Whistler code base. It looks like Windows 2000. If you've got an early machine, we've got builds going out regularly out to people to be able to do that. Our schedule around the release, I'll talk about in a little while, but we will actually have some updates coming out to show people what we're doing on the 64-bit platform. It's one of these things that you do a lot of work on, and I'm not sure if you have a lot to show for it. I think that's the way I would categorize what we do there. I really see that. I see the tremendous amount of effort and things like that we put into this, but in the end, really, all you want to see is Windows 2000 running on this other chip, and it just shouldn't really look all that different. But it's one of these things that really does, we feel, is an investment in what the future of systems are. Now, one thing there is that I do believe for the first year there will be some people who are early adopters of the system and do deployments with the system, but I do think that the first release of the platform, or the Itanium platform, will mainly be software developers and some people doing a sort of suck it and see sort of approach. I think our key scenario in that release is actually going to be, or the first release of the Itanium chip, is going to be for the software developers, because aside from anything else, we want people to update their applications so that it's a great 64-bit experience. Most 32-bit applications will be able to run, depending on how cleanly they were written for the 32-bit platform. And that they'll actually be running in a similar way to say a 16-bit app runs on the 32-bit platform. They'll be making their calls through a WoW layer, a WoW 64 layer down into 32-bit, and it's basically funked out. And like things at the moment are running, like Office 2000 is running fine. We're running, we've got a couple of thousand machines in Microsoft running at the moment. People are self-hosting or basically using those machines as their day-to-day machines. And except for the fact that they're incredibly loud and they're incredibly hot to have in your office, it's actually pretty cool. Other things that we are doing in this release that I think is a little bit of a sort of hidden thing, and a thing I know that we have a tremendous amount of work going on with, but it's not that obvious to you, is some of our engineering process stuff. One of the things that came out not long before we launched was the whole story around the postponed bugs, or the 63,000 issues. And I'll just clarify I'll clarify what some of those were. But what we're doing at the moment is we're actually going through and fixing many of those issues. We have probably the best examples that I have is we have a tool called Prefix that goes through the code and finds out where you've gone and allocated a structure and you don't free it later, or where you go and make some sort of call and in some scenario it might open something up. And we ran that on our code base around RC2 last year and did a lot of fixes there. Obviously the bad things that came up we fixed, and I think that was actually ended up being a couple of thousand issues. But like anything, when you run this sort of automated tool, you're going to find a lot of stuff that's basically noise in there. And my sort of example there is I think the sort of things that this shows up is not that different from what a thesaurus would show up if you're running Word. And I think anybody who's run the thesaurus or the grammar checker in Word the grammar checker would know that it gives you a lot of helpful things to do, but they're not really all that helpful, and you're probably not going to use them all the time. So there's a lot of noise stuff that came up in when we ran the prefix tool across the code base, and prefix is kind of like lint with a bunch of proprietary stuff that we've done internally to be able to find out some more things. But there were a lot of sort of noise issues. We didn't feel any customers or anybody would ever hit them in the real world. And the other thing is that I didn't particularly want to take the quiver effect across our code base. So we've gone through and we're going through and fixing all of those issues. And the aim really is to get to the point where we can run something like a prefix tool across our code or some of the other tools that we've got and not have any reports of issues in there, and just drive it down to as many or as few of those things. I personally don't believe that any of the things that we're fixing there are really going to be things that anybody would ever see in the real world. Other things that we've got to do for our own engineering process and fixing things up is we've actually changed source control systems. And if you've run a development project or you've been involved in changing source code, you've probably dealt with the nightmare of a source control system. And source control is just not a particularly fun thing. I was going to say pain in the ass, but I don't know if I can say that. We've gone through. We've got and we have, like any source control nightmare that you've probably dealt with, we have the sort of far end of the scenario there. It's really just like nightmare proportions sort of issues. And we're going through and we're reworking our source control system and the way that we produce builds and the way that we put the stuff together, so that the intention is that we can get higher quality builds out quicker, obviously. And that's kind of a hidden thing, and I wouldn't particularly care if I sort of say that. I say that just to tell you, things that we're doing and things that we're doing large investments in. I don't think that's anything anybody should have to pay for. I don't think that's something that the customers should have to pay for as what we're doing. But I was just giving you a insight into what we're doing. So that's four big, stepping back. That's four big things that we're doing for Whistler, and very large investment areas. We do have people coming through who are going to auger into different areas and really get down into some of the deep and dirty things, and talk about some of the things that are really cool that we're doing with Whistler. The only final thing that I actually wanted to give you an update is on the schedule and the status. At the moment we're working through our code complete date, and we did set that out to be the end of April. It's more likely working to the middle of May, which is actually not that bad. At the moment I'm trying to target around the 10th of May. I had gives me a little bit of breathing space there. Now, originally I'd said code complete at the end of April, and we'll try and get a release candidate release out in the end of May. That's probably going to be more like the end of June. I think that I know that it takes us about 6 weeks to settle down a release after we've got to code complete into a point where we feel like it is actually releasable. And so that'll be our first public release of it. Now that's really I say our first public release, but it'll only go to a limited number of people. It won't be going out. It won't be a sort of drop from the planes sort of thing. After that, in August, we will have a beta of the 32-bit platform and a release around the 64-bit stuff. And the 32-bit stuff is the sort of thing that I expect that will be dropping from planes. What we really want to be able to do there is, or what we know we have to do, if we had a look at the timeline and the history of things that, and the sort of things that I look at is the sort of timeline coming up to the end of the Millennium release. Really, before we do a broad consumer release, we need to get a beta out about 6 months beforehand. And just to be able to get coverage, and aside from anything else, to get to get the vendor, to get the vendors that work around it to be able to sort of get in line to be able to do it, or to work with us to be able to get that release out there. And, you know, we at that stage will be showing off, you know, the new UI, all that sort of stuff. And in fact, if you get the June release, you'll actually go and do it. It comes down to our target being around the end of Q1 2001. And, you know, at the moment, I honestly believe that we can do that. There's a lot of hard work between now and then, obviously. So at the moment, we're staying pretty much on track. You know, if I've got anything that's going out, it's about 2 weeks behind. I feel that we can get releases going out. You know, we'll get a release going out in June and a release going out in August that will be quite broad. And then we've got a close down plan, which is not dissimilar to the close down plan for the end of Windows 2000. You know, I've got a number of release candidates in there. The only thing that I've done is I haven't got as many release candidates, and some of the time frames are a little bit compressed. So, with that, John, have we got any questions or?
There's a question from Smart Pipes. They'd like to know what is in. How can they get a list of what is in SP1?
How can you get a list of what's in SP1? We will be providing. We will be providing a bug fix list. I think with the beta we'll actually be providing a bug fix list, but we definitely will be closer to the release providing the sort of things that we're going to have going out. To say that I can say today that I can give you the full list of bugs, I can't because I don't know them all off the top of my head. But at the moment it looks like it's somewhere around 360 issues, separate issues that have come up. Of those, probably about a fairly large percentage actually came up from internal people who are releasing software on things. For example, I know we fixed around about 100 issues for Exchange 2000. So of that, I would say somewhere around a third of them are probably things that have come in from real-world scenarios, and probably about 2/3 of things that have either come up for our own fixes internally, or things that we've had to do for data center, or things that we've had to do for releasing things like Exchange Server or App Center. We will get that list out with the release of SP1. I'll see if we can actually post it out to a JDP mailing list and get that information out to you guys better. But you'll be getting that. You'll be able to get that information as an update from your TAMs. Anything else? Anybody got any more questions? Nobody's got any more questions. Hey, look, there's Andy Ferguson. Oh. There's Steve Matham. Gee, everybody's here. Okay. And there's John Gehlsen. Oh. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I'm going to wrap it up, John. And is there anything more that we want to be able to do, or?
There's no more questions. Just ask you to log off.
Okay, if there's no more questions, we'll get you to just log off, and we're going to start up in 20 minutes. We'll start up the next talk, which is on RSOP, and Michael Dennis will be here talking about that. So thanks very much, and I'll look forward to seeing some of you next time we have a meeting out here, and that's it. So thanks.
There is one question.
Oh, there is one question.
Mr. Ferguson.
Andy Ferguson. How much of this gets covered in New Orleans? Andy is asking. Next week we have the WinHEC conference and the Windows 2000 deployment conference running in New Orleans. Andy's asking how much of Whistler gets covered. We are not really doing anything on Whistler down in New Orleans. And the main reason that we're not doing that is because we don't want to detract from people deploying Windows 2000 or put sort of the FUD of the next thing coming down the line. So basically the sort of things that you see, if there's a slide that talks in a little bit, and has a couple of points, there probably will be, someone doing that in something like a keynote. There won't be anybody going through any of the detail stuff that I went through. And I don't think there's any talks specifically aimed down that line. Yeah, so, and unfortunately I'm not going, Andy. So I won't be able to have any Scott's drink sessions. So, and I guess that's it. So, thanks very much, and I'll hope to see you all next time we have a face-to-face meeting, probably up here. And so I'll hand it, well, actually in 20 minutes we'll have the RSOP session starting up. Thanks very much.